Hey, I'm Marcus and I'm playing Crusader Kings 3. Or in this case, rather, reminiscing about playing Crusader Kings 3. I was on a very brief hiatus, just some days because I needed to do some work. And in that time span, Paradox released the 1.15 patch Crown for Crusader Kings 3, kind of making it difficult to operate with my mod stack. So we have several new systems implemented, like automated armies that you can see I cannot actually access at all because some of the mods override this particular UI screen. I did get the court positions to work, though you can see that some icons are out of bounds. Not sure about if it works 100%. And yeah, since I was in this position where I thought, hey, we've achieved so much here, and is there even something bigger to achieve, or how do we even progress? I thought that it might also be a good point in time to, kind of conclude this campaign. And in order to do so, I will just go over like all the kind of different rulers that we played, what happened in that time frame of about, 120 years almost, right? And so this is just a recap, a large recap of everything we did. And so let's go on. Of course, last time we left with King Skjalm, the strong arm, very securely positioning himself inside of Denmark as a king by deposing or largely deposing Hertug Gorm, who was the last kind of member of the Estrid line to have actually come directly from kingship, with his father having been King Thorfinn. And he still holds the right to Schleswig and Skåne, but we've kind of taken away all of his vassals. So, he's left without a larger power base, and he's in jail currently. Now, I got this comment that I didn't think of at the time, and that was really, really cool. What would happen if we just take Lerke here, who is his only daughter at this point in time at least, and marry her to Skjalm's firstborn, right? Which is Toke. And that would make a lot of sense. This would kind of bring peace into this environment, right? Because, Gorm wouldn't like it if we just were released being back. He would of course hold this against us, and I think that's something that could have been done, right? To maybe let him go in peace, right? Ransoming him, or even letting him go for a hook or something like that, and then marrying the daughter to Toke. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that their children would also inherit Skåne or Schleswig, but they would at least have claims to it. And then, maybe in about 20, 30 years' time, we would see Denmark even more in control of the Hvide family. And how did we get here? That is the main talking point for today. And in order to do that, I guess I bring up again the dynasty tree. So here he is. And let's go back to the beginning and look how large our tree has gotten, right? And this is all stemming from one person in the very beginning, and that was Skjalm. Of course, since I renamed the titles, he is called Hertug retrospectively as well. At his time, Skjalm was called a Jarl. Right, that was his title, which is not strictly, a title bound to his role in the hierarchy. It just meant that he was a very exalted chieftain inside of Denmark at the time, where you had a king, and then you had below the king there was only the vast array of nobles in the land, and he was one of them. He actually started out with only one little county in CK3 terms, right? And that was Norresund, a county that I have actually modded and created myself because it is not there by default. And we can quickly go out of here and have a look. So In vanilla CK3, Skjalm as a whole island is one big county. Well, I kind of took the northeastern part and the eastern part here and created one county out of it that I called Noresund, because I looked it up and apparently that was how this passage of water here was called in the early Middle Ages. Nowadays, of course, it's called Öresund. So we have Jörlunde here, and that is the ancestral seat of the Hvide clan, and this is where Skjalm began. Not this Skjalm, our original Skjalm. At that point in time, we did not have Copenhagen, so Copenhagen as it's nowadays called. So the only really thing that he had was Jörlunde itself. And what he did in his lifetime, first of all, he defined himself, or maybe let's go back to him so we can have a look at the man. There we are. In his lifetime, Skjalm defined himself as a man loyal to the Astrid king. And that was Sven II, the first of the Astrid kings, calling himself that because of his mother, Astrid, who had been herself a daughter of the former line, and that was the Knutling line. And therefore, Skjalm here, being a low noble, right, at this point, managed to, and this happened before the game, so that we did not have any control over that, but he managed to secure a marriage with Signe af Munse. And she had ties to that line as well, because her father was Asbjørn, and Asbjørn was in fact the son of Astrid too. So she had a royal connection, even if not a very direct one. And that kind of gave him, and especially the predecessors of him, that kind of idea that, hey, we are stemming from that noble line. So distantly there is some kind of distant claim to that kingdom. Skjalm, again, like Skjalm said, he was a king's man. That's how he defined himself, being very loyal to the king and protecting the king. We had some civil wars in the beginning, especially after the death of the first king. But also as someone who would dare to conquer. Even just being a small-time Jarl, he took it upon himself to capture Rügen. And this is Rügen here. So what he did was he looked for an opportune moment. At that point, if we zoom out again, you can see that there, of the original independent West Slavic realms, in here there's nothing left. And at the time, we already saw that the Obotrites here were fighting against the Empire. Then here the Pomeranians were fighting against what was then Poland. It is now the Empire of Lechia in this game, which is really cool. I think I never had that before. And so, there was constant wars here, and Skjalm was someone who figured out, hey, if I don't participate, if I don't make use of this, then we will have the Roman Empire directly at our border south of our island of Skjalm. And so what he did was, he launched this war. He had allies at the time, and that was to his benefit, because he was allied to the Jarl of Jylland, who was then a Thrugod. As we can see, there's still Thrugods here. And that was, if I'm not mistaken, either him or his father. I think it was him. It was Thrugod himself, Thrugod Ulfsson, yes. So we were allied to him, and he had about, at the time, over 1,000 troops, which was a lot at that moment in time. We also had some other allies, so we went and conquered Rügen, which was a very big thing. And there he did not actually stop, right? So he kind of was able to create this, duchy in CK3 terms. We called it a Great Jarldom later. But by also conquering Volgast here, ended up controlling like 2/3, no, not 2/3, but rather 2 of 5 counties in that duchy. And since his legitimacy was so high, he was able to actually create this Great Jarldom. And when that happened, we had just one goal left, and that was to take down the idol of Arkona, a place of pagan worship, a temple that was there in real history as well, where the West Slavic peoples were worshipping one of their primary deities known as Sventovit or Svatovit. So a place where people went and they actually gave money or any kind of valuables. Similarly, I guess, to how Catholics at the time, would pay to kind of get their salvation. And Skjalm wanted to tear this idol down, but he figured out that in order to do so, he would have to have the backing of the church. So he went on a campaign, so to say, giving Volgast to a bishop. You can steal it's still a bishopric. And then going on a large pilgrimage over to Canterbury here. And when he came back, he kind of had this support from the church because they saw that he was someone who sincerely showed his devotion to God and the church. It's always something I pointed out at the time, but I will again, just for saying it, that in medieval times it was not required of you to confess or give testimony. Like, you did not or never have to publicly say, I believe in God. Firstly, because that was a kind of a given, but secondly, that was not what was expected of you in the end. What was expected of you was to show that you are a Christian, and by doing Christian deeds, that was in fact what made you a Christian at the time. So he came back, he was able to get backing from the church, and he tore down the idol here. That was his, I think, biggest accomplishment in life, thinking back. And so he left this little realm consisting of Noresund, then Rügen, and along with the bishopric of Volgast under the Great Jarldom, the umbrella of the Great Jarldom of Venderland, named so because this was where the Wends came from. That's a kind of name that the Danes attributed to the West Slavic peoples. And in the next generation, I go back in the tree. Or maybe just to stay with Skjalm for a moment here. In the next generation, we had his firstborn Toke. He also had another son called Asa, a daughter called Sigrid, and another son called Bulli. And then very, very late in his life, he was already over 60. He had a son called Matthias. Matthias named so because, he was kind of a wonder, a miracle. The wife, Signe, at that time already had been 45 years old. Like, again, Skjalm was over 60, so it was kind of a miracle that he was born. Now, of the children, Toke would, of course, have been designated as the main heir of the whole, pieces of land that we had here. But since he had this second younger brother, Asa would also would have to inherit something. So what Skjalm came up with, storifying it, obviously, because the game does that by itself, was to give Rügen to Asa and Noresund to Toke, so that they kind of would split these responsibilities. I guess Skjalm would have also seen that, hey, it's quite difficult to kind of rule in one place, but also having to take care of another, where you have to go on a ship and kind of get over there and able to handle things. So yeah, that was kind of convenient. Then we also had the third-born son, Bully, who, while still in Skjalm's lifetime, became the king of Jerusalem. That was the other one of Skjalm's big accomplishments, being a crusader and actually being the one to crown a crusader king, because, yeah, he was the one to actually storm Jerusalem and besiege it successfully. So Bully here became the king of Jerusalem, was then out of the picture for the most time, because, yeah, we were simply out of diplomatic range and so on. He also got very old. I think he was alive until just a few years ago. But Matthias, we already talked. Very important then was his third-born, the only daughter, Sigrid, who was very, very close to Skjalm. He mentored her himself, always kept her around, wanted to make sure that she had the best marriage possible. So he found her a husband in this Asa here, was later called the theologian, who, kind of was this very gentle person, I would assume, being honest and trusting and temperate and so on. And that way he kind of thought, hey, Sigrid would be able to be herself in this marriage. She would have not a husband that would try to subdue her, but rather she would be able to act and maybe even be the dominant figure in this relationship. And we did see where that led, but maybe more on that later. So in this next generation, we have Toke. Now Toke is inheriting this great Jarldom of Venderland while having no lands in Venderland himself. And that was a stressful point. And he also got in trouble with Sigrid right on the funeral of Skjalm, where she loudly proclaimed that she would have been the one, or should have been the one, to rule here, making this very, very bold claim. And we thought, hey, maybe that might actually have been a thing that maybe Skjalm on his deathbed said to Sigrid, or maybe she misheard him, something like that. But that led to a lifelong rivalry, which kind of, made the whole lifetime of Toke very volatile. So much so that we had constant threats of someone assassinating either him or someone close to him. So, that became a whole dynamic in and of itself. But then Toke kind of made use of this. He thrived in this environment where there was like constant stress around him, and he being very much part of it. But he used that to his advantage, being this vengeful and wrathful man, also being impatient. He acted very quickly usually. So what he did, I think that was one of the first things he did when he came into this position now of being the Great Jarl. He annexed Roskilde in Sjælland. At the time, he did have a valid claim, and that was passed down from his father, because his father did this in order to kind of secure what he thought was a protection of the realm of Denmark. We had a stray Estrid, a brother of the former king, who ruled vast lands in Skåne, in Schleswig. That's where this originates from, right? That's where we have an Estrid rule over Schleswig and Skåne. And that was all done by Benedict, who was then called the trickster, I think. So what he did was he murdered his own kin in order to inherit their lands, and amassed so much land that it got to a point where he was like close to the doorstep of Noresund himself. And since at that time there was a I think underage woman at rule in Roskilde. He got this claim and then actually took over the rule here. Or that was Skjalm's original thought, was to protect, right? Because the kings were situated here in Finn. He wanted to make sure that Benedict would not be able to amass any more land, so being this overly dominant force inside of Denmark, then taking over the kingship. So that was Skjalm's idea, but Toke took that in a different direction when he acted upon it immediately, seizing these lands and moving his seat also to Roskilde. And by that began the Hvide claim to the crown of Denmark itself, which I don't think necessarily was in Toke's mind at the time. Kind of inheriting this thought process from his father, but at the same time being someone who also was very much into personal power and using that power for leverage. So seizing Roskilde, seizing Sjælland, there was now the complete island of Sjælland under Hvide control. That also gave him the right to call himself the Great Jarl of Sjælland. And upon doing so, he said that his brother Asser, we have here, would be the one to be the sole Great Jarl of Venderland. So he kind of bestowed that title upon his brother, therefore not making him a vassal anymore, but rather a peer in the hierarchy of the realm. And this kind of alliance also of Sjælland and Venderland would come in very handy. The Hvides always made sure to be allied to Jylland. We can see allied right now, but back in the day they were almost always allied with Jylland through different kinds of marriage that got complicated at some point. Like we really had to see and look into the family trees and how far apart these people were, because I kind of want to do this medieval role-playing approach where you would say, okay, we want people to be at least third cousins, not less, or not like second cousins or first cousins and so on. Of course, not first cousins. That was the kind of approach I wanted to take, and it worked for the most part. I think we had some marriages, I think, later on that happened in where there was only like 6 or 5 relatives between them. But we also saw that increasingly this whole dynastic landscape in Denmark got very narrow, with basically just the Thrugods, the Astrid and the Hvide being there at the top of the nobility. So with that great Jarldom here in mind and being in the very center, Toke focused on consolidating his power while at the same time fending off his enemies. And his enemies came in many forms. There was, on the one hand, still Benedict the Trickster, and on the other hand, we also had this feud, which, and I have to remember, like, whom actually did we have the feud against? I don't remember now. Was that? No, it was not against the Astrids, right? That would have been awkward. I really have to think back now. Do we actually, maybe can we see that by people he killed? I guess it was that. Was it that House Calv? I think so. There was a feud with a adventurer, and I think it was a German or Franconian house. So there was a house feud going on. Then there was the whole battle, or rather intrigue battle, against Benedict, and this took up a lot of Toke's time. Let's maybe go back to him to have a proper look at the man again. There we are. And Toke dealt with it by lashing out at people, being angry and stuff, but kind of always externalizing his pressure. Right? He was not someone to like take everything in. I forgot something. The big thing that Toke also did in his very early years was to take away the whole of Venderland from the Empire. So all of the lands that were de jure or by right parts of Venderland, he now claimed from the Empire itself, and that took a lot from him. So Toke led his armies here. At that point, he had vast allies, not only inside of Denmark, but also from Sweden. And bit by bit, they were able to take away Venderland. But they had to, I think, besiege all of this part here and fight many, many battles. And one of these battles, I think, happened around here in Vorgast. He actually was in the very din of battle where everyone was dying around him and so on. And that made him crippled. Like, he had a crippling trauma that he took back from this. So what we would nowadays call PTSD, right? So, and that was something that closely defined his actions as well, because he never fought offensive wars after that. And he did not want to fight wars, but he had to later in life. When the Astrid Kings, now being in that position where they had little land, and therefore not like that big a power base, and the by right or de jure seat of the Kingdom of Denmark being in Roskilde, tried to take that away from the Hvide. And in, I think, even 2 defensive wars, Toke had to claim or defend his lands, defend the claim against the claim of the Astrid Kings, and successfully managed to do so. So I think in this whole ancestral line here, I would even say Toke was the most important in the end, because he really defined that political landscape that we see here, with Venderland being part of the Hvide, but of the different line, the Esser line, and Skjalm here being under firm control of his line. Now, he of course had a lot of sons, but many of them died while he was still alive. That accounts for his second-born, Absalon, who was designated to become a great bishop. He went on a little excursion to Italy with his father. That happened because while fighting the Empire, the Pope excommunicated Toke, which of course was a very drastic measure. And but I kind of liked it because it really shows that it was called, or later called, the Holy Roman Empire for a reason, because the Kaiser was, or usually was, anointed by the Pope. And therefore, fighting against the Empire kind of meant fighting against Christendom as a whole. So, yeah, that was kind of justified. So, we achieved being lifted from this excommunication. But I said, okay, let's do a pilgrimage to Rome, because that would be some kind of penance. Absalon went along and in Rome decided to stay there, became a leper. Took him back to court, made him a bishop, but as we see, he died at just 30 years of age. Then we had the third-born son, that was Skjalm, and he was the one who Toke designated to be his heir. He really, really liked him, saw to his education, I don't think himself, but he took an interest anyway. And yeah, we do see that he was also like... he also died very early, and he died in a duel, as we see here, by Lasse. And Lasse was the son of Benedict. He took over all of these ideas and evil thoughts that his father Benedict had. And when first he had to fight Benedict, then he had to fight Lasse, did Toke. And so Skjalm here was killed in battle. And then he was really left with a choice. Okay, whom of my sons do I take? As we see, his latter 2 sons died young as children. And then he had 2 sons left. And one of them was Steg, and the other was Ebbe. Of course, we know whom he decided for in the end. But at the time, that was not such, not that easy a decision. His firstborn was, of course, by right the one to inherit all of the lands. And in order to go against that, he had to use, or Toke had to use all of his leverage, his power, to make that happen. Or to not make that happen in that case. He didn't like his firstborn. And we had that in many different occasions and events where he thought that Stig was someone who always complained about things and was very petty in his kind of affairs. He even got this nickname, the Dunged, right? So, yeah, he was not the one who Toke thought was the right person to bring or make the Hvide line flourish even more. Instead, he opted for his fourth-born son, which was Ebbe. So Ebbe here became the Great Jarl, while his brother Stig was actually made the Jarl of Noresund. Therefore, kind of sticking to tradition, at least the ancestral lands here in Jorlunde would have been passed from firstborn to firstborn and so on. Now, with Ebbe in charge of Skjalm, he was not someone who liked going into offensive wars himself. And very late in his life, he went on a crusade too. But I think that largely was it, right? Can we still see what he did here? There we see he fought a battle, and apart from that, yeah, you see there's hardly anything happening here. Oh, we have I defeated Greve Toke of Halland. Yeah, of course, he did fight battles as well, but there we go. That was again to keep control of Denmark as a whole, and to see that the kings, which would then have been passed to Lasse actually, would not have this immensity of power. Let me just get back to the kingdom and see what the title history was. There we go. Oh yeah, Lasse was never king, by the way. We had Eric, who ruled in Finn, who was kind of a weird guy, but at the time Toke was alive and they were great friends. And he passed this down through this line here of his brother, Prince Björn, I think. Then we had Gorm the First, who I think, let me just check. Who was the first Estrid to marry a Hvide? And that was Jutta here, the daughter of the first Assa. But he went against Toke. So that was something we definitely have to keep in mind. I think both Björn and Gorm tried to take away Skjalm from the Hvide. Unsuccessfully so. But we also had Lasse in here, who at some point tried to take over the kingship. And Lasse, like I said, the son of Benedict, was very, very powerful. And he chose this moment in time where he thought the kingdom was weak, but most of the nobles in Denmark sided with the crown. Of course, none of them wanted to have this very powerful ruler holding them in chains. Lasse was also a very, very capable man. Like, he had stats beyond belief. And so I think that was the war that Ebbe had to fight within Denmark, going against Lasse. But for the most part, Ebbe's reign was peaceful and really, really consolidating that power of the Hvide inside of Denmark, mostly by alliance, or not even alliance, but rather taking the offspring of the allied families to court and making sure that they don't pass along their claims to others. So he famously took, I think, about 4 women of the Thrugods to his court, saw to it that they would not marry like a big noble outside in Estrid or whatever, so that the Hvide quote-unquote claim on Jylland, or this ancestral alliance, would never be broken. And while Ebbe achieved all of these things, you do see that he was also called the Prince of Fashion, and that meant holding a court that went for the most extravagant of clothes, and so on. So he was this representationer, this representer, a person who represented the power of the Hvide through ceremony, through pageantry, and so on. Really, really showing everyone inside of Denmark that the real people in power were the Hvide and not the Estrid kings anymore. Yeah, he had this problem though, and his main problem was that with his first wife, seen here, who was an Estrid, he had children, 2 of them, but they both died as children. And he was already, I think, in the middle of his 40s or late 40s when he had no heir of himself. At the time, his thought process was to say, hey, if I die without having issue, I would pass this on to the sons, because at that point he was already dead, the sons of my older brother Stig, namely Ludwig. So he was the one designated by Ebbe for the longest time to be his successor. That did not work out in the end, as we saw, because he also had another idea or a different scheme, and that was to create offspring through adulterous affairs. And famously, he had, and I don't think we can see this right now, but I guess we can see that when we go over the children. So he had an affair with a low noble woman called Elizabeth, who was like this classic mistress, still being at court while he was with his wife. So we imagined that she would not be living at court directly, but rather being on some manor on Skjalm, where he would visit her from time to time. And we do see they had 6 children in total, one of which was a son, and that was the son that he always wanted in the end. But as we can see already, he also had daughters with her, and since she was so beautiful, most of the children ended up beautiful as well. Especially like all of their beautiful daughters, but I think Skjalm also has this handsome trait, right? So that comes from the mother's side, obviously. But Ebbe at the time, because when first he got together with Elizabeth, they did not produce children right away. I think that only started about 3 or 4 years into their affair. So he also took a second woman as an affair, which we can see here. Oh, she's currently not well. She's probably dying. Poor Anneliese. Anneliese Thrugott, so from the famous house of Thrugott, and they actually had 3 sons, one of which died early, the others now being a bishop and a governor, respectively. And now there was the question of saying, like, whom of my sons should take over my lead. Now, all of them were born bastards, of course, so none of them were legitimate at the time. And through this process of watching them, having a look into their interests and how they develop, Ebbe figured out that him here, Skjalm, would be the one to lead the Hvide in this next generation. So he legitimized him while promising all of his other bastard children that they would be legitimized on his deathbed. So in game terms, what we did, it was when Ebbe died and Skjalm took over, he legitimized all of his brothers and sisters. Should we stay with Ebbe for a moment still? Because, that was the main thing, of course, that defined his later rule. And with him dying, he died at 66, so also very late into his life. I think he died, or did he die on the crusade or afterwards? Might have been even afterwards, right? But he fought in a crusade when he was very, very old, funnily enough, in Spain. That also went successful, also got the Hvide another county that they could rule. And so upon his death, Skjalm took over, and Skjalm was in this position now where he had all these vast resources. He had loads of sisters to marry, right, to other rulers in order to receive alliances. That's where we had the renewed alliance also with Sweden, because he was married to a princess of Sweden through her father Eirik. And she has this kind of sister here, Ostrither, with somehow was Skjalm's affair too. I'm not exactly sure why that happened or how that happened, but I think she was his childhood crush, and therefore he wanted to pursue her. And I guess he did. Skjalm now really took these ideas of his father and putting them into practice when he actually went for the crown of Denmark. Completing, I think, a circle here that began around the time from the passing of the first Skjalm to Toke, where the Hvide became really the defining power in central Denmark. And he would take over through a claim. I think at that time the then King Gorm II was still a child, so it was rather easy. He had lots and lots of backing from the other nobles in the realm, so that's where you could see everyone else was acknowledging the power of the Hvide and kind of bend to their rule. So he became king, and after this coronation, yes, we can see he now wears the crown that in the very beginning King Sven II Estrid wore. And this kind of brings us to the end. Now here is Skjalm. He has 5 sons. So again, there's no shortage of sons. The Hvide line is very secure. It's more of a question for him now how to consolidate the power, how to pass on the power to his sons in order to keep them happy, not to have this internal strife within the Hvide that they always avoided by kind of dividing their rule, starting with the first Skjalm, right, passing the land in Venderland and in Sjælland to his sons. And then Toke, of course, famously giving the whole of Venderland, or that title, bestowing it to his brother. Now we would see to it that how would we kind of pass on the lands to our children here while still maintaining this the resources that we get, right? We do see that we get over 11 gold here, while I think capping at max almost, with court amenities and so on. So lots of money coming in, and they obviously want to hold that position. And of course, if you have to distribute your lands to your children, that kind of diminishes. So I probably see to it that Sven here would become another bishop, possibly one of the other sons as well, and then maybe even looking for expanding the reach of Denmark. Possibly he already did so by attacking the empire again, going for the Duchy of Holstein that he gave to his own brother. Again, making sure that his brother also, right, had something to rule over. And that would be, I think, his main, his now main goal in life, moving on. But that being said, he's 34. He would still probably, as we know, the Hvide grow old, so he would probably rule for another 30 years or so, and a lot of things could happen in that time. Possibly some of his sons dying as well. Maybe Toke here not even being the one to take over, but rather his sons. All of these things could possibly happen. And I guess we will only find out in the history, in the cinema of our minds, because I, at this point, will not go on playing this campaign. For me, this really kind of ended the whole cycle of this campaign beautifully when Skjalm here became the king, being the crowned king. This brought the whole Hvide ascension to power to a close. And of course, I mean, we could go on. We could try to create an empire whatsoever. I'm not the player to do these kind of things. I don't like it when there's too many lands in my reach and I have to become this administrator of power where I'm just constantly focused on keeping vassals happy and so on. It's part of the game I don't like very much. And I don't like conquering very much. I don't like the war system and so on, the battle system, which we will see if 1.15, that new patch, makes good on some of the issues or the grievances that I have with the game. Especially the Crusade mechanic that 1.15 now says is making a huge difference in. By not having all of the armies trickle into the designated target and then running into meat grinders, but rather having this point where they would all meet up and then deploy on some neutral ground and then marching on to their destination. So that should be better for them, I guess, in the end. But we will, or maybe we will see this happening in a new campaign. I kind of still need to figure out the mod stack and if everything is in par with 1.15, especially one of the bigger mods that I use, like Rise and EPE. That's Ethnicities and Portraits Expanded. That's where we get all these beautiful people here from. We know that CK3 Vanilla has this, for whatever reason, tendency to create very ugly people. And of course, if we look at people all the time, we want them at least to be nice to look at, right? So, kind of very much want to have EPE in here too. So I don't know if I start directly with a new campaign, but I'm thinking about one. And the one I am thinking about will take us away from Denmark. We will still stay in that sphere, or kind of sphere. We'll just go down here, and that will bring us to England, Normandy, but then also Scotland, Ireland, and so on. It's one of my favorite starts, and I just want to do it one more time in this format. Of course, all of the other campaigns I've done just privately by myself. And now I would like to stream a campaign where we start actually as a landless adventurer. And that landless adventurer would be a Norman. I will see if we start in 1066, because I'm never satisfied by the way the whole conquering of England actually works out in the end, where we still have this large Anglo-Saxon power base over here, which of course would diminish then in the harrowing of the North. But the harrowing of the North kind of never happens in the game, at least whether it does now, kind of, in an event series. But it's still, you would still have it on every game. I guess we can still see it here, right? Yeah, Anglo-Saxon. I guess there's Norman here. But there we go, Anglo-Saxon, Mercia. These wise guys, they pretty much hold power here every time I play the game. And that's, I don't know, just not, doesn't feel right to me. The Norman reach was far grander, going into the north, to Scotland itself. And that's actually where I want to go. So, drumroll. My idea is to play Robert de Bru, or Robert de Bruce, as a Norman adventurer. He is in the game, he's a character in the game, so I just need very, very little modding, making him a landless adventurer at the start. And of course, his successors would become famous as first the Earls of Annandale, it's about here. And then, of course, in the 14th century, becoming the Kings of Scotland under Robert the Bruce, as they were then called. So this whole Bruce clan has its origins in this Norman knight who came to England in when it was conquered by the Normans. and then had his business up here. I think I might even start in that period somewhere in the 1080s, where William Rufus, so the son of let me just. All right, we have to go back a long time, I guess. Oh no, there we are. King William the Conqueror, and that we had Rufus here. And Rufus, in real history, would have been the one to, conquer this part here, really, making sure that, or this part rather, what is here called Cumberland. Don't think that's a historic term. Cumbria is, but not Cumberland. Up to here, right? So, therefore also pushing the sphere of Norman influence way beyond and into Scotland itself. Where, of course, then we had someone like Robert de Bruce or Robert de Bru, who would, then get his power from the Scottish king, who at that point also had strong Norman ties. Anyways, but that will be the story for another day, and that's maybe the next campaign that I'm choosing. If you do have ideas for another campaign I could launch and play, then you're very free to do so in the comments. I regularly look at them and take your ideas into account. So if you have any idea of something that you would really like to see me play, then don't hesitate, bring it forward. And yeah, that's it. That concludes the campaign with the Hvide, from a small-time Jarl of Norrisund to Kings of Denmark within 4 generations. It was very fun to play. I had not played in Denmark before, actually, for whatever reason, even though I've countless of hours in CK3, I've never played in Denmark directly. And it was fun. It also was very stressful at the time, especially under Toke's rule. There was this constant wars and the intrigue stuff with the murders and everything happening at once. But especially then under Ebbe, things just smoothed out, and it was fun to play this side of the game, where it's more about, the dynastic issues and representation and all these kinds of things, rather than just simply doing war all the time. So, with that being said, I hope you'll stick around for another campaign, and I guess that's it for the Hvide. Bye-bye, guys, and see you too. Bye-bye.